What's up, Philadelphia? Welcome back to First Time, Long Time. I'm Colin Newby at 97.5 The Fanatic and 93.3 WMMR, coming to you weekly, for now, with the Philly Sports Talk podcast. This is episode 7. Check out the pilot episode and some quick hitters in our podcast feed. Check out Zach Berman's guest appearance last week on First Time, Long Time. And I'm pumped to be on Spotify and Apple now, as well as all major social media platforms. Today I want to get into some Phillies chatter, and then later in the episode I want to do a special segment that has to do with the big event that MMR was at last week. But for now, we're going to talk about the series victory out against the Kansas City Royals at Kauffman Stadium over the weekend. And this series didn't start very well. Looked pretty bad when Taijuan Walker got crushed on Friday night. And by the way, check out some all of a sudden controversial stuff on 975thefanatic.com about Taijuan Walker, who's the new lightning rod of Phillies baseball. But this series really turned around on Saturday. The Phillies ended up leaving Kansas City with 45 hits. They scored 11 runs in back-to-back games on Saturday and Sunday to really break out of that offensive slump. They had a terrible series against the Braves in Atlanta during the week, but they had a decent night on Friday, putting up 4 runs, and then really exploded Saturday and Sunday in those big slugfests. They also looked better against the Astros at Citizens Bank Park, coming back home. You had a tighter game here with Zach Wheeler on the mound, and he kind of ran up his pitch count in the early innings. He didn't retire as many hitters as methodically as he typically does. I know Yordan Alvarez stretched a big count, really wore Wheeler pretty thin in the early innings. After the 4th, it didn't look like he was going to get very far, but he settled in. He got a quick inning in the 5th, and then he ended up getting through the 6th, allowing only 2 earned runs, and got through with under 100 pitches, surprisingly, considering the pace he was on early in the game. But that allowed the Phillies to scrape it together. They were down 2-0. They end up tying it 2-2, and they won one of the better games of the season. After Wheeler turned it over to the bullpen, the relievers really got into stride here. You had Orion Kerkering come in with a shutdown inning. You had Hoffman come into the 8th, which kind of seems like his natural flow at this point, and that was to set up Carlos Estevez for the 9th, which the Phillies said at the time they made that trade, they really want him to make that 9th inning his own. In extra innings, you had Matt Strahm, the big weapon out there, shut down the Astros, and the top of that order, the high-powered Houston lineup, while also inheriting that ghost runner on second base. Because let's face it, extra innings, if a reliever gives you one shutout inning, it's an excellent job at this point in time. The Astros countered with Josh Hader in the 9th inning, and he looked absolutely dominant. He was throwing that sinker in the high 90s, and then he was keeping some of the Phillies hitters off balance with the slider in the high 80s. He really looked nasty in the 9th inning, but Houston had a pretty shorthanded bullpen last night. They end up keeping him into the 10th inning, and that's where the Phillies eventually tagged him. The extra inning model now with the new rules and the ghost runner on second, especially for a road team, if you haven't scored in the top half of the inning, it is just very tough. There's no margin for error for relief pitchers. Giving them the loss in that game is probably a little bit unfair. I know it's not an earned run, but the fact that Josh Hader lost the game seems a little bit off, but Bryce Harper's the one who tagged him. He got that walk-off hit to bring home Kyle Schwarber. Of all people, Kyle Schwarber started that inning on second base as the ghost runner. Rob Thompson actually said after the game that he didn't want to use a pinch runner. He had Garrett Stubbs available, also Buddy Kennedy, who doesn't look like much of a runner. But he said that those two guys on the bench couldn't really outrun Schwarber by a significant margin, so he ended up keeping the DH in there. But last night at Citizens Bank Park, I think the Phillies played with a sense of confidence that hasn't really been there lately. They beat a decent team over the weekend out in Kansas City, and that's an element of momentum. But what they really do need to do is string together a good amount of wins here, and winning the series opener against Houston is a big start to that. Now they do have some work to do. Got 2 games left in this series. Aaron Nola faces Justin Verlander on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, you got that lightning rod I mentioned. You're throwing Taijuan Walker. But I think you got to look at this team through a lens of preparing for the postseason. They seem to have at least settled a little bit out of the slump that they were in post All-Star break. And I talked last week about the concept of streaky hitting or timely hitting. These things happen over 162 games, and they're somewhat subjective, so be patient with that Phillies offense. They broke out over the weekend. They got 3 runs last night, not an offensive explosion, but I think they're in pretty good shape moving forward, and I think Rob Thompson is going to use his pitching staff in a little bit of a different way than a lot of people might like through the end of September here. That's why they're throwing Taijuan Walker. I think it's about giving Christopher Sanchez an extra day of rest because you don't really have a spot starter that you can throw in there on Wednesday. They want to push Sanchez back into that Atlanta Braves series over the long weekend on Labor Day. That approach probably isn't going to satisfy the fans that want this subjective sense of urgency. Rob Thompson isn't really the type of manager who's going to show a sense of urgency during the regular season. He believes in prolonging things through 162, and he's kept to his belief all season that 2024 is about Red October. It's about avenging the NLCS loss last year. It's about winning a World Series. The Phillies are still going to chase the top seed in the National League. They're going to be competitive. It's important to get a bye and avoid that wild card round series that can easily be a crapshoot and knock a team out. More so than anything, I think they want to be fresh for Red October, though, and that means aligning the pitching staff. You saw what they're doing with Christopher Sanchez this week. It's almost like they're sacrificing the short-term gain of using him in the final game against Houston in order to keep his health, keep him fresh for the postseason. I think the same approach is going to apply to the other 3 starters that they plan on using during the postseason. That's Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, and Ranger Suarez. And I think it's going to apply to the bullpen pitchers who they want to be in rhythm by the time that calendar flips to October. But today's episode is pretty special because I'm going to get to talk about something I really love. I don't love that many things that don't have to do with sports, but I'm going to talk about one of them, and I'm not stepping away from Citizens Bank Park to do it. I'll talk about that after the break.
If it's happening in Philly sports, Colin Newby's talking about it. Go with him behind the scenes of legendary sports venues with the best athletes and the most iconic media personalities of the greatest sports city in the world.
What's up, Philadelphia? Welcome back to First Time, Long Time. And a few weeks ago, we talked about Pierre Robert, 93.3 WMMR, talked about his introduction to the Struts down at the Fillmore and how much MMR really touches this city. It's such a Philly thing to have this rock and roll station that dates back so many decades. Well, that got maximized even more last week. Bruce Springsteen played at Citizens Bank Park, and yes, 74-year-old Bruce Springsteen is who I'm talking about. The guy played 3 hours on a show, and I was lucky enough to get to work the MMR broadcast with Jackie Bam Bam and Pierre Robert. Before the concert, they had Vinny the Mad Dog Lopez on. That's the original E Street Band drummer and a Rock and Roll Hall of Famer. Great to hear Vinny Lopez telling stories from the road and going all the way back to Ed Shockey on WMMR back in the old days. He's the one that helped Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band hit it big back before he was this giant rock star and an iconic American celebrity. Also had Eric Bazillion of the Hooters there. WMMR helped launch the Hooters back in the 80s with a famous contest. Great stories all the way through those hallways of WMMR leading down to 97.5 The Fanatic. And who better to tell those stories than Kevin Gunn, aka the Professor. Kevin Gunn worked at MMR for I think it was about 40 years before he retired back this spring. And he was on with Pierre Robert the day of the Wednesday concert, the first Bruce show at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. And him and Pierre talked about the old stories of Bruce and the E Street Band and how much Kevin Gunn has acquired the knowledge and really acquired the love of music over the years, because that's what I feel with sports. I'm very passionate to do it. I'm intense about it, but it has that competitive feel. And when I flip over to the music side down the hallway at WMMR, it's got more of a passionate feel in terms of peace and joy rather than competition. And Kevin Gunn really wrapped that up so well when he joined Pierre Robert. I'm going to read Gunner's quote here. I've said this before, and I'll say it until I die. It doesn't have to be Springsteen. It's whatever music takes you somewhere. He went on to say, it doesn't have to be Bruce, but I only pray that you find something that makes you feel as good in your life and inspires you as much in your life as this music has done for me. And you'll have found really, as the song says, the key to the universe. And of course that reference is to Bruce Springsteen's Growing Up, where he says, I swear I found the key to the universe in the engine of an old parked car. Bruce at age 74, soon to be 75, rocked Citizens Bank Park with classic hits, his new hits, for the better part of 3 hours. Absolutely unbelievable show, and it's no surprise that the crowd was so crazy outside of Citizens Bank Park when Jackie Bam Bam and Pierre Robert came back out onto the streets. This was around probably 11:30 midnight right on Pattison Avenue outside of Xfinity Live, and it shouldn't surprise anybody that Pierre's out so late at night with all these people. He's a man of the people. But I wanted to play a few sound clips from some guests that Pierre interviewed to go live over WMMR that I was lucky enough to see in the heat of the moment. The first clip, it's from a woman who has seen Bruce 103 times. Take a listen.
Thank you. What's your shirt say? It says, 103rd Springsteen show. It's my
hometown.
My hometown. That's great. What's your name?
Barb.
Have you followed him around the country?
We have, and we saw him last year in London. Wow. Here was our 103rd show.
Around the world. It's great to see you, Barb.
You as well, Pierre. Great.
That one really shows you the crazy joy, the euphoria of the concert. Had she had a couple drinks? I don't know, maybe. You gotta ask her that. Gotta ask Pierre that also. Second clip I want to play for you is probably the most emotional one. This is from a younger girl who gave a shout out to her father. She asked Pierre to play Thunder Road because that song is what her father used to sing to her to fall asleep when she was a little kid. She spoke from the heart here, gave the shout out to Mark, her dad, and Pierre Robert gave her the request. Take a listen.
What's your name, young lady? We have one more lady and one more request.
Grace.
You had a song you wanted to hear.
Thunder Road.
Almost at the end. And is it one of your favorites?
It's one of my favorites. It is.
Why did you want to hear it?
It is a song that my dad used to sing to my siblings and I to put us to sleep when we were younger. Yeah, my dad is here tonight, actually.
What's his name?
Mark.
And then to Mark and to you?
Yeah, to Mark.
I heard you the first time, or the third, I don't know. One thing that was so great about when they play this song, everyone waits for the sax solo, which Clarence used to do, but not only do they do that sax solo, but it's a 5-piece horn section. So Jake was in the center next to Bruce doing a solo, and then there were 2 horns on the left and 2 horns on the right, and it became a symphony at the end of Thunder Road.
And Thunder Road has always been one of my favorite Bruce Springsteen songs because it is emotional that way. It can touch you. I remember writing for WMGK about a year or two ago the most inspirational Bruce Springsteen lyrics. Thunder Road had one of them. Don't run back inside, darling. You know just what I'm here for. So you're scared and you're thinking that maybe we ain't that young anymore. When I saw Bruce Springsteen live at the Wells Fargo Center back, I guess it must have been about 10 years ago now. Wow, that's the last time I had seen him. I think Thunder Road was the most impressed I was the entire performance. And I gotta throw a third one in there just because this one's too funny not to put in.
Can you say MMR rocks Australia?
MMR rocks Australia, I'll tell you what.
MMR rocks Australia. Might be a Philly thing, but it travels all the way down under the farthest stretches of the Eastern Hemisphere. Thanks, Philadelphia, for joining me on First Time, Long Time. You can check out a new episode next week.